In today's video, we have a variety of news to discuss, including a handful more prospect signings. We have news on the AHL season. We also have news on the Kings front office shakeup, and we have some trade rumors to discuss regarding the Flyers, Penguins, and Florida Panthers. We'll discuss all the latest news coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of news to discuss today, so let's dive in and get started. First off, let's get started with the news that the American Hockey League has announced that the remainder of their 1920 NHL season has been canceled. Now, to me, this is not surprising news. I really didn't see a way they'd be able to continue. They don't have the options like the NHL does in order to play without fans in the arenas. A much higher percentage of their revenue come from ticket sales compared to the NHL, who have much broader TV deals and sell a lot more merchandise and that effect. So they have other revenue streams. So at least they have something coming in, whereas the AHL relies so much on ticket revenue that it really doesn't make sense for them to play without fans in attendance, and such a big chunk of their league are in spots as well that are just unable to open their facilities right now because there's just too great a risk in their communities because of the COVID-19 virus. So unfortunately, there's a lot of prospects that are going to lose a lot of developmental time. There's all kinds of organizations, especially ones going through rebuilds, that are going to have prospects not getting those playoff runs that they were really hoping for. That would be really big for their continued development to help them into next year. But all is not lost. I would imagine NHL rosters are likely going to make an exception to allow more than usual black aces to be on the roster. We're probably going to see a lot more players get called up than normally would have been to be available and might be practicing with the NHL team if and when that's able to resume as well, so that they can actually get around, at least get on the ice and get with the NHL team. They may or may not get into action, but of course, once the NHL gets going, if they get their playoffs underway and they get some injuries, well, they're going to have some players that are going to be needed to be called upon as well. And like I said, at the very least, they can be like a black ace and kind of hang around with the team, get some practice time in, and kind of see what happens. Now, the other part of this as well that's really unfortunate is that it's really hard to say when the AHL is going to continue. I mean, obviously, with the talk of the next NHL season for 2020-21 possibly being pushed back until December or January, the AHL season likely isn't going to be able to get underway before that. So, I mean, obviously the NHL season and what they're going to do is certainly going to be impacting future American Hockey League plans, especially if to come to fall that they're not able to have games with fans in attendance. It just does not make sense. It's not viable for them to play. So, it's really hard to say when many of these players and many of these prospects are going to be able to get on the ice again. It's really unclear from that regard. Now, I do know in some cases there's some European places that the players have been able to play, like Sweden, for example. So it wouldn't be shocking to see some prospects maybe head home when they're able to. They might be able to play sooner in those leagues than they could in North America. So I guess we'll have to see what happens on that front, but certainly a lot of question marks regarding when the American Hockey League will be back on the ice. Now, in other news as well, the Los Angeles Kings made an announcement today that Assistant General Manager Mike Futa will no longer be with the club. He's got an expiring contract. He's not going to be renewed, which, many around the league kind of had a little bit of a head scratch over. Not quite clear what's going on behind the scenes there, but Mike Futa's got a lot of respect from around the NHL. His name has been brought up numerous times when there's been other teams have had GM openings. He's been a highly respected hockey guy for a long time, really known for his scouting. He's led amateur scouting a lot in the Kings during his time there. So certainly a guy that won't be without work for long, I can't imagine. But they will be having somebody else lead their draft team for the amateur draft. But Futa is especially known for his scouting tactics. So I guess we'll have to see here what this means, where he might end up. Do they have their eye on somebody else they want to bring in? I know there's also been some drama a little bit in Vancouver as well with Jed Brackett likely leaving the Canucks organization. They've been having a tough time coming to terms on a contract, and a lot of that just boils down to not only money and term. That doesn't seem to be as much of the issue as more the philosophy and the autonomy that he's looking for in the role. So there's certainly a lot of tension there in Vancouver as well. So, I mean, that's another guy that's well respected around the league and certainly responsible for, a lot of their top prospects in the organization. So it's going to be, interesting to see how these teams move forward without some key guys in their organization, but certainly two guys that will land on their feet and have other opportunities. Now let's jump into the signings that were announced here today. We have a handful of these to discuss. The San Jose Sharks announced today that they've signed 19-year-old winger Igor Abramovich, who was in 2019 6th-round picks, played in Russia the last few years. The Sharks have described him as a fast, physical winger who they feel can adapt to the North American game, so certainly another interesting prospect in San Jose. The Sharks really have some interesting prospects that they'll have to keep your eye on here in the coming years. He'll likely need some time in their minor league affiliates before making the jump, obviously, to the NHL. The New York Rangers have announced they've signed 22-year-old goalie prospect Tyler Wall, who spent the last 4 seasons playing for UMass Lowell. He was originally drafted by the Rangers back in 2016 in the 6th round, and likely going to have an opportunity, like I said, when the American Hockey League does get back underway. I would imagine Wall will have a prime opportunity to be on the goaltending tandem there. Can't imagine he'd have to go down a lower level, considering that they have Lundqvist, Shesterkin, and Georgiev all to NHL level right now. It's really not likely that all three of them return for the following season, so therefore that does leave some gaps there between their minor league affiliates after Shesterkin get called up. So Tyler Wall likely will form one half of the goalie tandem in the American Hockey League once hockey resumes in that league. The Anaheim Ducks have announced a pair of extensions on some young players that are still kind of in that prospect category. They've signed prospect forward Sam Carrick to a 1-year extension worth $700,000. Carrick was originally drafted by the Leafs, but has been in the Ducks organization for the past few years. He's been a tremendous hockey player at the AHL level. The last 2 years combined, he's pretty much a point-per-game player, and he also did get some NHL time last year and didn't do too badly, and this is a one-way deal as well. We've seen the Ducks signing a lot of these younger players to cheaper one-way deal contracts as well. So not a big signing. A player who could play a role with them next year, and at the very least he's getting paid NHL money regardless of where he ends up. Another young interesting player here for the Ducks. Now they've also announced the same thing on a 2-year one-way contract for young defenseman Brendan Gooley, who they acquired from the Buffalo Sabres just a little bit over 1 year ago. His deal pays him an average annual value of $800,000. He gets $700K 1 year, $900K the other, for an average of $800. Last year, he pretty much split between Anaheim and San Diego Gulls affiliate, about 50-50 just about, between the NHL and AHL. But he's a proven, pretty solid player at the AHL. Could use a little bit more time in the NHL. Certainly earned an opportunity. He kind of ran out of space in Buffalo, but certainly another young defenseman to keep your eye on in Anaheim. Brendan Gooley's the third younger defenseman that they've signed to one-way deals here in the last week. Plus, they've already got some of their more veteran guys like Cam Fowler, Hampus Lindholm, Josh Manson as well. So, as I mentioned in previous videos, I wouldn't be shocked if the Ducks do eventually trade one of their more veteran defensemen there, but certainly hard to say if and when exactly that happens. It's going to be a while before we really see any trades in the NHL, but they have a lot of guys now that are younger on short-term, cheaper contracts that can evaluate and very well might be able to take spots from some of the more veteran guys on the team here in the coming years. Now, in regards to the NHL offseason rumors, I want to take a look at. Like I said, we're focusing on 3 teams. Let's kick things off with the Philadelphia Flyers. First up, I want to reference an article by Sam Carchidi, who's talking about their backup goaltending situation. Obviously, Brian Elliott, who played that role, was a pending unrestricted free agent, and it's difficult to say if he returns, although in this article, he feels that Elliott is the perfect backup, really, for Carter Hart. Elliott's numbers might not have been as good as you might want last year. Obviously, the team in front of them certainly there was a couple of really bad games that really inflated the stats there, and they kind of feel, based on what he can provide for what he likely would sign for, that it makes a lot of sense for them to remain with Brian Elliott for the backup role in Philadelphia. But at the same time, there could be some other guys to take a look at. Now, the article references a few guys, specifically Cam Talbot, as well as Corey Crawford and Anton Khudobin of the Dallas Stars, although they mentioned that Khudobin likely isn't really all that realistic, probably would cost too much money. And really, if you look at it, if they can get Elliott to sign for $1.5 to $2 million, it's likely going to be the best deal for the team and the player, and it makes a lot of sense to keep him around, at least in this writer's opinion. And I must have to say, I probably agree with that. For the most part, Carter Hart can carry the bulk of the load, but at the same time, you need to be confident in your backup goalie can play 20-25 games and get you some wins on some key nights there. It makes a big difference sometimes between being a playoff team and not. Cam Talbot might be another option. He was there briefly before. He does have a pretty good relationship with Carter Hart as well and could be a good mentor for him, but Talbot's made it known that he would like to have more of a starting role rather than play the role of a backup. So it's going to depend on what other offers are out there for him, but they had the opportunity to sign Talbot before and they opted to go with Elliott over Talbot, so that tells me they very well might do the same again. Now, the The Flyers also have some other contracts that they need to take a look at here as well, including UFA forward Nate Thompson's probably safe to say. Thompson probably doesn't return, and I think a lot of their other moves as well that they could be looking at will depend a lot on the health of forward Nolan Patrick, who missed all of this current season before the pause kicked in due to some problems with migraine headaches and things that he was having. So not really clear what his future holds. They were thinking of him to be a big part of their future, and right now he hasn't been able to live up to that. So as of right now, it's certainly tough to say what other moves the Flyers make. They have a lot of money tied up amongst the players they do have under contract, and they're not going to have a lot of wiggle room with the big question mark of Patrick. So I really don't see them being super active and trying to be cautious with their spending here during whenever we finally get to the offseason. Now I also want to touch on the Pittsburgh Penguins and an article that was published through Pittsburgh Hockey Now, talking about some rumors that were kind of going back a little bit to the current season as well as what they might happen here for the coming year. Now we've talked a lot about the Penguins and the likely possibility that they do trade a goaltender before the start of the 2020 season. Obviously Tristan Jarry and Matt Murray are both restricted free agent goaltenders. Both had, pretty good runs here. Murray more so in the past when they were winning the Stanley Cups. Tristan Jarry's been a better goalie as of late and kind of stole that starting job from him. Obviously would likely come in at a much cheaper rate given the fact that he doesn't have that prolonged career that Murray has had so far. Obviously Tristan Jarry's really was a breakthrough goalie last year, whereas Murray's got a couple cups to his name. So clearly he's going to be the more expensive guy to sign longer term. But at the same time, Pittsburgh likely needs to make a decision here because they also have the expansion draft coming up, not too distant future, that they could end up losing another goalie if they have two solid goalies like that on their lineup, since they can only protect one when they get to the expansion draft time. This article references the fact that there was trade talks apparently between the Penguins and the Colorado Avalanche, where apparently Joe Sakic was interested in acquiring Matt Murray. Of course, those trade talks never got too far to the point where they were close to pulling the trigger, but it does show the fact that they might not be as confident in Philip Grubauer as some might think. I know I've seen many Avs fans comment on this channel in different videos talking about the fact that they'd like to see an upgrade in goal, that they do like Grubauer, but for the most part, he's been a little bit less inconsistent. He's been okay. Like he had a .916 save percentage during his time in Colorado, and really that is average. It's not bad, but it's not awesome either. So clearly Joe Sakic is tinkering, trying to see if he can get an upgrade, and Murray might be the guy, but Murray's going to come in at a pretty good, relatively expensive contracts. Hard to say, but he does come with some pedigree. Obviously, Murray's got the playoff experience that could prove to be very valuable to a team like the Avalanche as well. Pavel Francouz has proved to be a pretty decent backup goalie, so hard to say what they do. Would they trade Grubauer for Murray, or would there be separate moves involved? Not quite clear how that would go, but just the fact that there was talks between these two franchises before, and they felt there would be a possibility that those talks could resume and pick up again once we finally complete the season, once we finally reach the offseason for the 1920 season, because obviously the Avalanche are a team that's kind of getting close to being contenders. They're knocking on the door, and it wouldn't be surprising to see Joe Sakic make this kind of move, but it's hard to say what the price tag exactly would be. Not sure if they would take Grubauer back or what package would have to be put on the table here for Rutherford to bite on that offer, but I guess we'll see here once we get to the offseason if there's any resumed talks, and maybe Matt Murray could end up to being a member of the Colorado Avalanche. Now, I also want to touch on the Florida Panthers. There's been some reports that young player Henrik Borgstrom, at one point who was regarded as one of their top prospects and the franchise's top prospect for some time, might be heading back to play in Finland, which is a little bit surprising. He was our first round pick back in 2016. He came over and had a couple of really solid hockey seasons playing in the U.S. college hockey system for the University of Denver. Then during the 18-19 season, after signing his contract, he had a 50-game stint with the Panthers. Didn't do too bad, but obviously, like most young players, had a period of adaptation. Didn't, put up a ton of great numbers. But then last year, he was only in a handful of games, spent the bulk of the season in the American Hockey League, and it just seemed like he basically took some steps backwards, or at the very least, the Panthers just were not pleased with him enough to give him more NHL time. But at the same time, their top couple lines were so deep with so many forwards that I'm not sure it makes sense for some of these young players to play a fourth line role, depending on what their skill set is. They can't always play a different type of role and be expected to put up any kind of offensive numbers and remain successful at that level. So unfortunately, it looks as though there might be a little bit of a developmental gap in Florida. If Borgstrom goes back to Finland, it's really difficult to say if and when he comes back. We've seen other young players like Alexei Heponiemi really take a little bit of a stunt in his development as well. He had a solid year playing in the Western Hockey League, came over after being drafted, played a year in the WHL, put up some phenomenal numbers, but then he went back to Europe, did okay there, and then he spent last year in their minor league affiliate in the AHL. It really didn't do all that great offensively speaking. Not sure what his future holds, especially where there might not be AHL hockey for some time. Not sure where he ends up. Does he maybe go back to Europe as well? I know Owen Tippett's another player that's been in their system for a few years. I would think that he would get an opportunity next year because he did have a really solid American Hockey League season this year. I do think at some point here they got to work some of these guys in and give them more of an opportunity, but it's been hard right now with considering the forward group they have to give them a whole lot of an opportunity playing an offensive role. But like I said, I also can't help but wonder if there might be some issues in Florida when it comes to developing their prospects. Too many of these high draft picks are just not working out for the franchise. So let me know what you think down in the comments, and we can continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And again, a quick shout out to all of our channel membership holders. I greatly appreciate all your support. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.